Hey everybody, I'm Francesca Maxime. This is another Wise Girl for you on this Thursday, December 1st, and just trying to get a few little snippets out there since I've been away and wanted to give you something you could chew on over the weekend if you wanted to, if you feel like it. I invite you. It's certainly no obligation, obviously. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of something that a friend of mine called keep getting to take the test until you pass, meaning why do we tend to sometimes find ourselves in patterns of behavior that we don't like or with people, whether they're in personal relationships like lovers or partners or friendships or even professional relationships like bosses that we may not find very fulfilling, but we're kind of going back to it again and again because it seems kind of familiar somehow. But we leave one situation when it's not working for us, hoping that the next one will be different, but then it kind of isn't. So why does that happen? Really, I think from my own personal experience, it happens because when we were kids, we got into a situation that was sort of survival based, that worked for us at the time, but as an adult doesn't work for us anymore. And we haven't really figured out how to use adult coping strategies to deal with the present moment situation that is in front of us. For example, when I was a kid, my father used to promise certain things and then not deliver them. He would say he was going to get me whatever birthday gift I wanted and then say, nope, at the last minute, I'm not giving it to you because you didn't come over, when I had wanted you to, for example. This is when my parents were divorced and I was living with my mom, but had visitations with my father. And I learned through that repeated behavior, because I was attached to the idea that I wanted my father to love me, that I needed to kind of accommodate him in order to get what I wanted, which was the birthday present. But fundamentally, it was way deeper than the birthday present. It was that I wanted his love, his affection, his attention. I wanted to be able to have a relationship where I was not the one in charge of emotions or of action, of stepping into the space, but that I could really just be a kid and receive his generosity. However, in my case, at that time, I realized that, that is just something that he wasn't capable of doing. He wasn't interested in doing, that it just wasn't his way, it just wasn't his nature. But I continued to bring that kind of behavior into my personal, professional relationships, and it just didn't really work because what ended up happening is I would step in, overdo, overly accommodate, bend over backwards to try and ameliorate a situation, whether it was a TV station that I was working for or a guy that I was dating. And it would end up inevitably with me feeling burnt out and not paid attention to. And then the other person feeling like, they kind of sucked me dry and, didn't really have a deep respect for me or use for me in a way that would be more long lasting and, have better boundaries in the relationship that could then enable it to last longer, whether it was personal or even a job. So why does this happen? Well, as kids, we're sort of programmed to, as I said earlier, to survive, but we also take on a lot and think that things are our fault that aren't our fault. Like I mentioned earlier, just because my father couldn't be the person I wanted him to be doesn't mean there was anything wrong with the way that I was. However, that's kind of the belief we take on and then sort of hold oftentimes in our adult life. So when we go into relationships or professional work situations, we're often entering, unbeknownst to us, with our 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 7-year-old self. So this little kid is sitting here saying, I want to be heard and I need to be heard. But we are acting with our new boss or our new partner or lover or friend or whomever it is. We are acting from that little child place oftentimes, even though we're in this adult body, and reenacting a dynamic where that person is sort of like the father or the teacher or the mother that we had issues with when we were a lot younger. So what we're sort of trying to do is work out what we couldn't have worked out when we were a kid, but we don't really know how to do it. And our sense of, justice, meaning like, we need to get this worked out. Like, this little kid needed to be paid attention to. It was wrong that they didn't get what they needed, meaning the child of us, when we were a kid. That's a big deal. And so as an adult, when we feel like we could actually do something about something, we want to go forward and step into the space and do it. But we're sort of like a mama bear trying to protect a baby bear, using our claws instead of our big words and our indoor voice. We can kind of get a little out there when it comes to however we deal with the interaction. That could mean that we yell, or that we shun someone, we run in the other room, we hide, we don't talk to them, we get into a fight, we act nitpicky, we act holier than thou, whatever it is to kind of try and protect that little girl part of us, or little boy part of us. And like I said, that mama bear adult part of us is trying to do that, but she doesn't know that, like, she's not really needed so much at this point. What's kind of needed is, the calm mama bear, not the fighting mama bear, because even though we're triggered and we feel like the present day situation is as threatening as it was in the past, it's really not. It's really not. And it's our kid reactions that are the things that are coming up and bubbling up for us. So in order to kind of have the baby bear of our inner child, so to speak, of our younger self, so to speak, grow and learn, what do we need to do, right? We don't need mama out there fighting for us anymore, because we're adults. We have real lives. We have relationships. We have work. We have jobs that we want to be healthy, and we want to be good and have a nice back and forth with people. We don't want to be holding everything in, being contracted, feeling like you're sucking it up and everything is, getting done and people like you maybe, but you're dying inside, or that you're spent, because you're trying to not make waves even though you are really feeling like the situation is unjust or terrible, or that you become combative. You don't want to do that either. So how do we sit with ourselves and say to that little baby bear, here, baby bear, inside, here are the tools that we can give you to kind of grow up and be more equanimous, more coming from a balanced place, a place of more wisdom. Well, as I've spoken of again and again and again, it's about being non-reactive. It's about creating enough space so that if and when you're triggered, you can cultivate the ability to stay within yourself. And oftentimes it just takes 90 seconds to let an initial emotion or trigger rise and fall. So we notice what's happening in our body, if there's vibrations or tingling or other kind of sensations that arise that let us know, like an increased heart rate, that, we feel like a situation is off, that we're getting triggered by, whether it's the look that our partner gave us or the, word that our boss used or whatever. And we just kind of let that be there. We let that sit there for a minute. Breathe. Let some time pass and see if we can't refrain from doing anything. So that instead of being reactive, when it's appropriate, we can respond properly. Now, a lot of people who've survived trauma, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's, physical abuse, whether it's deep neglect, they feel such a sense of injustice, and rightly so, that they were not properly tended to and cared for, that violence was committed against them, that they want to get back, that there's a real idea that you want the person, whoever it is that perpetrated it, and if not, then the current incarnation of whoever it is that you're imagining is a new perpetrator, your boss, your lover, whomever, that you want someone to pay. So this idea of being a survivor of a traumatic situation and then having this idea of wanting there to be justice is totally valid and totally understandable. The thing is, does it work for you? And are you able to hold that experience with sadness or with compassion, meaning that you recognize that, you were sad and that it was terrible and that it wasn't just, but that in order to act in a way that is helpful today in the present moment, you can take a deep breath, focus on the reality at hand, notice that the person with you or in front of you is not the original perpetrator, because hopefully those by now you will have had the boundary to be able to distance yourself from and not repeat any injury, that you're then able to look at that situation and say, okay, maybe by not feeling as though the injustice is so overwhelming and I need to step into the space and create a ruckus over it, maybe I can just sort of take a deep breath and look at how it makes me feel and then see what would be a wise response at some point going forward, as opposed to just a reaction that could then trigger a whole other chain reaction and create a whole huge story that's greater and bigger and perhaps worse than the one that was really at hand. So I just invite you to consider that, another thought there. And that is the last video of the day. I hope that everybody is terrific and had a good holiday over Thanksgiving, and welcome to December. Bye.